This year, Samsung gave us the Z Fold 8 and the Z Fold 8 Ultra, so like many of you, I have a decision to make. Do I go with the brand new form factor, or stick with the classic Ultra format? And like many of you are probably thinking, if I prefer the Ultra, why not just stick with the 7 and save some money? And I'm sure I'm gonna get some hate for this, but if I prefer the new wide format, maybe I should wait till next month to see what foldable Apple unveils, since it's also supposed to be similar to the Fold 8. So I'm gonna test out the 8 and the 8 Ultra, how they feel in your hands, how they fit in your pockets, what it's like to use both phones with the screen closed and with the screen open. I'll do side-by-side photo comparisons with all 3 of these phones because one of them's missing a lens. And hopefully by the end of this video, both you and I will have a better understanding of these devices and how to make the best decision that's right for us. Okay, so let's talk about using these phones while they're closed. The Ultra is more like a traditional slab phone when closed, just skinnier. When I first got my Z Fold 7, I was like, wow, this screen is skinny. And it actually bothered me a little bit at first. But then I realized that I was really using the phone open most of the time anyway, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But there's still plenty of times when I use the phone closed, and after a couple of days, I got used to it. On the 8, everything is shorter and more cramped. Much different than a normal slab phone while using it closed. And it's been hard for me to get used to everything being so smushed. When I'm using my phone closed and browsing through Google News or Reddit, I much prefer the Z Fold 8 Ultra over the regular 8. And then there's the keyboard when typing on a closed screen. On the Ultra, the keys are a little skinnier and smushed together, and it's a little harder to type on, but I got used to it on the 7 and it's not that big of a deal, plus there's also voice typing. And because the screen is taller, you can see the content that you're typing a lot better. Yes, the keys are wider and more comfortable on the 8, but because of the size, the keyboard takes up like half the screen, so it's much harder to see the content that you're typing into. So for the overall typing experience, I definitely prefer the Ultra when the screen is closed. When it comes to one-handed use, I also think the Ultra is better. Not only that, I think it's the best phone I've ever used one-handed. Because it's so skinny, my thumb stretches all the way across the screen and more. And I think it's much easier to use one-handed mostly for that reason. I can perform gestures on either side of the phone. It's much easier for me. The Z Fold 8 is fatter and my thumb does not stretch all the way across the screen. If you do use gestures, luckily the back gesture is the same on both sides of the screen, so you don't really need to reach across. Of course, the 8 is shorter, and my thumb reaches all the way across from top to bottom, so there's that, but I just find that it's not as comfortable with one-handed use. And if your case is at all bulky, it makes it even wider and fatter. I expect that some of you won't agree with this, but that's my take. When it comes to using the phones closed, I definitely prefer the Ultra. The 8 may win in keyboard accuracy, but I prefer to see what I'm typing into. Now, I know a lot of people are concerned whether or not these phones will fit in their pockets. I really don't care much about that, but I'll try it out anyway. I tried both of these phones wearing shorts and wearing jeans, and both phones slipped right into both pockets. Now, I tried this without a case, so your mileage may vary if you have a bulky one. And I'm sure this is totally subjective based on who you are, what type of clothing you wear, and if you even keep your phone in your pocket. Why did I do this section again? Real quick, if you like this type of straightforward content where I get right to the point and try not to waste your valuable time, please subscribe to my channel. I'd greatly appreciate it. All right, let's continue. Now let's talk about using these phones unfolded, because this is where I feel that the 8 has an advantage. Why do I say that? Well, the Ultra has almost the exact same aspect ratio, whether it's in portrait or in landscape. The 8 actually gives you a better option in having true landscape and true portrait. They're 2 distinct aspect ratios. And it's nice having the option, because if something doesn't look right in landscape, you can just turn it to portrait, and hey, that looks much better. And why wouldn't you want to have options? When I was first testing out the 8, I was browsing through Google News and Reddit and other sites, and I wasn't that thrilled with the way it looked. So I turned it into portrait, and I was like, oh wow, that looks much better. More like the aspect ratio of a regular phone or a tablet. Now I'm already used to the 7 where I just open up the phone and that's it. I almost never turn the phone into landscape because it doesn't really change much. Unless, of course, I'm watching a video and using a case that has a kickstand because they prop up better in landscape. And I think the videos are slightly larger. So with the Ultra form factor, I'm just going to be opening it up and using it right away. With the wide, I find myself opening it up and turning it to portrait. The only negative is that when I turn it into portrait, I then have to find where the power and volume buttons are. Sometimes they end up on top, sometimes they're at the bottom. But that's something you'll get used to. And like I said, I rarely flip the Ultra form factor, so this is something that was never a problem to me. But when I flip the 8 into portrait mode, there's actually hinges right where my thumbs naturally sit. And when I do things like perform gestures, my thumb actually hits the hinges. It's not a huge deal and it's something I'll get used to, but it's worth mentioning. Then there's multitasking, which is really great on both devices, and it's one of the reasons I love foldables. I can have one app open on one side, one app on the other. I can open 3 apps and place them wherever I want. Samsung gives you a lot of flexibility with multitasking on these devices, so you can move them around and resize them. And even though it's great on both devices, the 8 wins here because of options. It's wider in landscape, and it's taller in portrait, and although I love multitasking on both of these devices, I prefer it on the 8. So overall, with general everyday use, I do prefer using the Z Fold 8 while the screen is open. 2 distinct aspect ratios, more options. Then there's consuming content, like videos and games, watching movies on your phone. I don't do a lot of this, but I know some of you do. A lot of people say, oh, the form factor is so much better on the wide because you get that natural landscape mode and you won't have as much letterboxing, the bars on the top of the bottom of the screen. But you know what? I opened both of these phones side by side and played a YouTube video on them. And the actual video was almost the exact same size on both devices. Plus, what if you're watching a square video? The Ultra does have more screen real estate. So I'm personally not sold that watching videos is better on the 8 just because there's less letterboxing. Then there's gaming, and I have to admit I'm not a huge gamer anymore. I like to play puzzle games like 2 Dots and Hexasort. And when I open those apps on the 8, it actually forces it into portrait mode. Not something I'm used to from the Z Fold 7 or the Ultra. I did download Call of Duty on both devices, and when playing that game on the 8, I had a wider view of what's going on. When I played it on the Ultra, I could see a little bit more of what's above and below me. And I don't really know if one experience was better than the other. I mean, both were fine for me. So yeah, I watched a number of videos and played a number of games, and I personally couldn't care less. They were both fine for me in that respect. Okay, I guess we should touch on the crease. And of course that's the same on both of the 8s. You can see it if I hold it to the light. The crease is obviously a little more noticeable on the Z Fold 7, both in being able to see it and even more so being able to feel it. On the 8 and the 8 Ultra, it's less visible, and you feel it much less too, which is cool. That said, I'm totally fine with the crease on the 7, both in the way it looks, the way it feels. It's not something I ever really even think about. And if I do, it's like, oh, there's the crease, big deal. So yes, they improved the crease on the 8s, but that won't affect my decision at all. The 8 series also has an anti-glare coating on the screen, and it actually does make a difference. If you hold it up in the light, you can tell. And again, this is an improvement, but not really a deciding factor for me. Alright, we should really talk about the cameras, because with the 8, you're losing the telephoto lens. And this was one of the biggest reasons I was upset about the 8, because I don't want to lose that lens. So I put all 3 phones on this rig to test out the cameras, and I took all types of photos, videos, landscape, portrait, macro, night shots, inside, outside. And what was interesting to me is that the Ultra sometimes had the best picture, but sometimes the Z Fold 8 looked like the best picture to me, and sometimes it was the Z Fold 7. And for the type of photography I do, the results weren't that different overall. I think the biggest difference was the zoom, because the 8 lacks the telephoto lens. But when the other 2 were zoomed in past that, the photos looked horrible anyway. Now, I'm more of a casual photographer. I grab the phone out of my pocket as quickly as possible to take cool shots of family, friends, pets, and all the things that are important to me. I rarely use pro photo or pro video. I don't shoot anything in RAW. And although the photos I take of my family are very important to me, as a casual photographer, I think the playing field is a lot more even than I thought it would be. Yeah, I don't like losing the telephoto lens, but after shooting all these photos and videos, I don't think it's the end of the world. And out of all the tests, this one was the most important to me because I thought it would be a lot more drastic. Of course, the winner is the Ultra, but they're all pretty good. And when it comes to battery and charging speed, I'm not gonna sit here running my own tests, but I think if you're deciding between the two 8s, it's pretty negligible. 4800 mAh to 5000 mAh. Both have 45 watt wired charging and 20 watt wireless charging. So they're pretty similar. If you're throwing in the 7 though, 4400 mAh as opposed to 4800 and 5000. So definitely a jump from the Z Fold 7 to the Z Fold 8 Ultra. 25 watt wired charging as compared to 45. That's a difference. 15 watt wireless charging as opposed to 20. This is due to the new silicon carbon battery tech. And of course, if you have the 7 and you're not happy with the battery life, maybe that's enough for you to switch. For me, probably not. So after going through all that, I think it made everything a lot more clear to me. I have the Z Fold 7, so am I gonna upgrade to the Ultra just to get a little bit better battery life and a little bit better camera? Slightly less crease and anti-glare? I think that's a hard sell for that kind of money. What about between the 8 and the 8 Ultra? I prefer using the Ultra while closed. I really like using both of them while open, but appreciate that the 8 has 2 distinct aspect ratios to choose from. And of course, coming from the Z Fold 7, I do appreciate that the 8 has a new aspect ratio, just because it's fun and exciting to try something new. And hey, I hinted at this earlier, but I'm somebody who switches between Apple and Samsung like constantly. And we all know that Apple's making a device just like this one. And I'm seriously considering waiting until next month just to see exactly what they have to offer before I pull the trigger. Yes, I love Apple and Android. Everybody hate me all at once. So this whole process has been great for me. I have a much better understanding about the differences between these two devices and what the trade-offs are. I'll have to admit I still haven't made my decision yet, but I think I've made things a lot easier for myself, and I hope that I've helped you. If you'd like to let me know what you think, or if you have any questions, or if you want to hate me because I mentioned Apple, feel free to let me know in the comments. And as always, thank you so much for watching.